Once again, thanks for joining the session. This is Erica Mohan speaking. I'm the Grants Management Specialist here at the Cultural Division. James Shermer, our Grants Administrator, is going to take it from here. So just quick housekeeping guides before we get started. There is a chat box. Feel free to ask questions in the chat box on the bottom right-hand corner if you're logged in on the computer. You're also welcome at the end to unmute yourself and ask questions if needed. And please keep yourself on mute throughout the duration of the meeting. And Jim, take it away.
Okay, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us this evening. And before we start, I just want to thank Phil Dunlap, our director, and Erica Mohan, and everyone in the division with their help these past few months as we've undertaken the restructuring of our grant program for the coming year. This evening, we're going to be speaking specifically about the General Operating Support Program. And you probably, if you haven't already had a chance to look at our website, it's undergone a lot of changes. And there are categories of the different funding programs that are now published or available to review. On that same website, under the Funding tab, there is a Organizational Grants Manual, which is the document you're looking at right now, and you're welcome to open that and look at that this evening. We're just going to kind of look at some highlights of some of the changes, and then I'm going to share with you some an outline of the new application form itself, just to familiarize yourself with some of the questions, and then we'll hear from you at the end of the evening to get any questions that you might have about the program. So briefly, this manual contains both the General Operating Support Program and the Program Support Grants. Again, only this evening we're going to be talking about the General Operating Program. So there's some introductory information about the division. So on page 3 is the description of the Operating Support Program. So as opposed to different ways we've done it in the past, award amounts will be using a funding formula to determine the qualifying amount for an organization in this category. And the formula now is going to be based on an organization's average annual operating expense. And that'll be determined by averaging the total functional expenses from the past 3 years from the IRS 990s. And on our same website, there is actually a calculator where you can actually begin to do some forecasting if you like, and you can estimate the maximum potential of this award in this category with that utility. So that's something that you can use now. That calculator is on the website. Ultimately, the award of an organization may receive is really the result of the qualifying amount and the combined average score the application receives as a result of the panel review process. Some things we're looking for in these applications. You'll need to demonstrate a number of different qualities. A stated and demonstrated commitment to diversity, equity, accessibility, and inclusion, a strong administrative oversight and management practice, long-range strategic planning, an appropriate level of cash reserves to sustain the organization from year to year, a qualified, engaged, and financially supportive board of directors, a strong, rather strong community support evidenced by earned and contributed revenue and volunteerism, policies and practices that support and engage artists, both local and non-local, marketing strategies to attract local visitors as well as cultural tourists to your programs, a commitment to evaluation and continuous improvement, resilience to adapt to internal and external changes, and demonstrating an awareness of Broward County and the civic issues that impact the lives and the well-being of everyone. Now, the eligibility for this program are nonprofit organizations whose primary mission is arts and culture, and they're eligible to apply and provide the following criteria also have to be met. The nonprofit is a tax-exempt status in good standing. The corporation is in the state of Florida and has a 501c3 tax-exempt status from the IRS. The nonprofit whose primary mission is arts and culture, and the incorporated address must be in Broward County. And you have been operational in your arts and cultural discipline for a minimum of 3 uninterrupted years immediately preceding the date of the application. A consecutive 3-year history of receiving cultural division funding through program support grants or other operating grants. A governing board of at least 50% of whom reside in Broward County and meets regularly and operates under a set of bylaws. Majority of the organization's programming occurs year-round within Broward County and must employ at least 1 permanent full-time employee or permanent full-time equivalent. Now, that full-time employee may, for any calendar year month, is an employee who is an average at least 30 hours of service per week during the calendar month, or at least 130 total hours of service during that same calendar month. An FTE employee is a combination of employees, each of whom individually is not a full-time, but it can be a combination of different people, and where the equivalent is to 1 full-time employee. Employees receive an IRS W-2, whereas independent contractors receive a 1099. And the division reserves the right to request additional documentation to verify the eligibility of the employee. Contract workers and seasonal employees do not count toward an FTE. It's filed with the IRS 990. Again, we're looking for at least 3 years and an average annual operating expense of $125,000 or more, according to the organization's total functional expenses from that 990. Organizations that come close to that 125K minimum will be considered by the division on a case-by-case basis. So if you're kind of on the cusp of that expense threshold, please do contact us, and we'll guide you as to which program. If not this one, the program support might be the better fit. The majority of the organization's total functional expenses must be program or service-related expenses determined by the organization's 990. And again, the division reserves the right to adjust an organization's annual operating expenses depending on extenuating circumstances, including but not limited to payments to subsidiary organizations or capital campaigns. Now, briefly, there are restrictions for the funding. We do not fund educational institutions, including schools, child care centers, colleges, and universities, are ineligible to apply for the GOS program. Organizations that are closely affiliated with such institutions should contact the division prior to submitting an application, and you may be asked to provide additional information. And there are restrictions on the use of funds, allowable and not allowable expenses, which can be found on page 16 of this guide. If an organization is not currently eligible to apply for GOS, but will become eligible during the grant cycle in which they would be applying, an organization may submit a written request for exemption. And now the other change to this program is that we're planning to issue grants on a multi-year basis. So this will be a 2-year application. and with these grants, each year's budget is subject to approval of the Board of County Commissioners because there potentially can be fluctuations in the funding level. So a quick summary, the project implementation period is from October 1st of 21 through September 30th of 2023. Today we're talking about the application workshop for January 6th. And then the eligibility deadline is January 8th. So if we need to rehearse any new applications or new prospective applicants to this program, we need to be talking with you soon. And again, the application deadline for this particular program is February 26th of 2021. Notice there are going to be 3 different grant panels with this particular grant program, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. The applicants will be co-located or clustered based on expense side, so it should be reviewed in similarly sized organizations. And then as a result of those panel meetings, the recommendations will go on to the Broward Cultural Council for approval in May and June of 2021. So the criteria is slightly different, refreshed for 2022. 3 broad categories of criteria: artistic merit and quality of programs, presenting a strong artistic vision and leadership, demonstrating some recognition of artistic excellence and quality of programs, including awards, recognition, occasional local media, maintains a loyal audience base that is evidenced by consistent attendance numbers and ticket sales, hires local professional artists, and builds a pool of artistic talent. Under the community benefit criteria, diversity goals are achieved through intentional outreach efforts and/or partnerships with diverse groups, implements strategies and programs to promote lifelong learning through the arts and to broaden and deepen an understanding of the art form through accessible and affordable programs, evidence of a commitment to diversity in staffing, board recruitment, and use of vendors, increase access to the arts through local and neighborhood-based programming, demonstrating an awareness of the responsibility to increase awareness and value of the arts and participate in advocacy activities when possible. Ongoing efforts to assess and evaluate your audience needs through surveys and other basic evaluation tools. And then under the organizational capacity criteria, demonstrating solid administrative leadership and management, an engaged and contributing working board of directors, demonstrating strategic planning efforts undertaken on a regular basis, progress in establishing sound financial policies and practices, the practice of generating renewable sources of annual income, accurate and timely preparation of financials, and demonstrated progress toward establishing cash reserves to sustain the organization. And you provide training and professional development opportunities for both your staff and your board members. So those are the broad criteria of the program. Now I'm going to move further into this manual because this is a discussion. What you're seeing is the program support grant. What is new is the rating system. So one of the significant changes compared to previous programs is that we're no longer going to be using a 100-point rating scale when grading the applications, or the reviewers will no longer be adjudicating based on a 100-point grid. In other words, the criteria now will be a 4-point rating system between 4 and 1. So let's talk about that for a second. So an applicant's rating is used to determine the funding. So applicants that receive a rating of 4 are considered a model organization meeting all review criteria in an exemplary fashion. A rating of 4 is considered a rather rare achievement. So applicants that receive a rating of 3 are considered good, but some development is needed. And applicants that receive a rating of 2 are considered in need of significant improvement in multiple areas and are marginally fundable. Now, depending on the availability of funds, applicants with ratings of somewhere between 2+ to 2- may or may not be recommended for funding. Organizations that receive a rating of 1 do not meet the division's criteria and will not be recommended for funding under any circumstance. So this will be true for both the operating grant program and the program support program. So there's a gradation, there's 4+, 4-, 4-, 3+, 3-, etc. And that will have an influence on your award, and that you can rehearse in the calculator. I'll talk about navigating the online application in a minute in a little bit more detail. And then these are some definitions about demography that might help you. So let's talk about some budget restrictions. In all cases, there's in the general operating support program, applicants should include overall expenses of the organization. And I'll show you the form that we're going to be using in a second. In the general operating category, an organization most recent board-approved budget is submitted as part of the application. And while these grants are considered unrestricted, as a matter of policy, the division does not fund parties, receptions, alcohol, general travel, not related to the execution of artistic programming or professional development of staff, equipment, or purchases not directly related to the execution of artistic programming. So the focus of your funding should be on, I think, programmatic issues. And then we provided you some definitions in the manual about categories of expense. So as you're completing that Excel form, which I'll show you in a minute, it'll help you situate the expense and the revenue correctly. There are some support materials which you're going to need to provide with your application. As you've done in the past, the application can accommodate a wide variety of different types of medium and media for your application. So obviously PDF and Word and JPEG and files are fine. As far as images, PDF is preferred. For published materials, make sure that the form is new and that the file is actually clean. So I always suggest preparing new files prior to the submission and test them to make sure that they do function correctly. Video files, media is acceptable. MP4s, MP3s, MP2s, .mov files, small movies or media are good to demonstrate your organization's product, as well as audio files. So 5 minutes short. Consider the reader. They have a lot of material to go through. And then some of the financial information you'll need to assemble for the application. A PDF copy of your organization's current and board-approved budget. Financial statements from the past 2 years, including a statement of activities, profit and loss statement, a statement of financial position, balance sheet, assets and liabilities, and the most recent audit if applicable. Organizations that are kind of in the operating budget category of 1.5 million or more are usually required to provide their most recently certified financial audit. A little description about the panel review process. We recently went through a citizen review, or rather a call for citizen reviewers, so I say, to develop a new pool of panelists who are going to be reviewing applications for us for the coming year. And they, with a chair from the Arts Council, will be convening the different panels. So here's some information about the nomination process. But most importantly, what I want to point out to one change is that the staff will be facilitating the meeting with the panel. Now, you're more than welcome to come and attend the panel meetings, but there will be no dialogue between the grantees and the panelists, unlike in the past. So we'll be working directly with the panel to keep them on track. Another change for the coming year is that we've worked to change the administrative code to allow for disbursements and payments at the beginning of the grant cycle. So that will be a change. Now, the trade-off is that the project reporting will be more rigorous at the end. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. So, and then as usual, if you're funded, there are some publicity and credit requirements in terms of logo and attribution that you need to attend to, be that printed materials or website or online. And please do post your programs and events in artscalendar.com. That only helps increase your presence. And so here's a quick calendar of the general operating program schedule. Then one other, we've always offered this in the past, is that the grant portal allows you the utility to be able to share drafts of your application prior to the deadline, so that you can move the copy of the application to your directors or to your authorizers or your grant writers for approval. And you're more than welcome to send the same copy to Erica and I, and then we will do a technical review of your application for 1 week before the deadline, and we'll give you some constructive feedback or some comments on how to strengthen the application. So please do take advantage of that technical review week between February 8th and February 19th. Okay, so that's the manual, which is online now. The website is coming together quite nicely. So what I want to share with you now is just a brief tutorial of an outline of how the application will run. And this will be sent out when we do the onboarding for the script for the application when it becomes published live. Again, these are the workshop dates. Target is February 26, 2021 for the deadline. And again, there are going to be 3 different panels based on size of the organization. An appeals process, and the implementation is February 21 through September 30th of 22. And the eligibility must be met at the time of the deadline. And late or incomplete applications will not be accepted. Now, the portal will not allow you to send in an application with something missing. It will preclude you from sending the application in successfully unless all the attachments are correct and also all the questions have been filled out. After the technical review and the applications come in, the staff will perform a review. We only provide a technical review of the application. The staff does not make any artistic or aesthetic decisions about the application. That's the role of the panel. And these individuals are appointed by the board, rather the Broward Cultural Council, to serve. And again, the meetings are public, so we encourage you to attend. But once again, as a rule, statements or questions or discussions between panelists and grantees will not be permitted before, during, or after the panel meeting. and it's the reviewers that will provide the qualitative review of the application. Now we'll have to run all 3 panels in order to make a funding recommendation. And then those recommendations, the panel can only but recommend, and then that recommendation will be forwarded on to the Broward Cultural Council for their consideration. And after they've confirmed or altered any recommendations, this amongst all the other grant panels will be forwarded on to the County Commission for their approval during the budget hearing process. And again, the request award size is on a funds available basis. And again, it's governed by the documented annual operating expenses. And so you need to assemble those 3 years of IRS 990s. Now notice these are the 3 sub-tiers that will be reviewed in 3 separate panel meetings. So GOS1 will be groups that have expenses between $125,000 to $500,000. GOS2 will be $500,000 to $1.5 million, and GOS3 will be organizations with operating expenses of greater than $1.5 million. Now, if you're successful, you'll be notified in writing by the division on how to administer the award. Normally, there'll be a grant management workshop. And then there is going to be project evaluation reporting as we've done in the past. But as I mentioned earlier, the project report will be much more rigorous because you'll need to keep accurate records in terms of an accounting of the actual uses of the funds compared to the projected uses that you expressed in your original application. So and it's a requirement that you supply that to the division to close out the award. And so the project report will require proof of expenditures as to the allocation of awarded funds as part of the submission. So we'll be doing kind of a reconciliation at the end of the year with you. Okay, so again, these are some of the acceptable extension files that you can use. The application itself can accommodate about 950 megabyte. So it's a fairly robust portal. But again, when you supply things like movies or audio files, please do keep them relatively short. Just remember, consider the reader. All of the applications are password protected, and a separate password will be provided to eligible applicants via email from the division. Only eligible organizations from the division will be sent that password. And again, this is not your personal password for signing on. This is a password that is unique to the application. So these are just some brief screenshots of the website. Notice if you go to the Cultural Division and you click on Funding, and then you'll be brought to 3 sections: Grants for Artists, Grants for Organizations, and Resources. You want to click on Learn More for Grants for Organizations. And then the category you'll want to click on next will be the General Operating Support category. And then these buttons are the onboarding links to start the application. So you inaugurate the application by clicking the button called Start a New Application. And then you'll be brought to this window. This is where you'll actually enter the unique password, the gate, if you will, to the application. And then it launches. And you can navigate the application by either clicking these buttons across the top. It's like turning pages in a book. It'll actually advance you through the application, and there's usually a next button at the bottom of the page as well. Either one is fine. Either one will work. And then the form has a spell check utility for each of the narrative fields, so you can check your spelling on the fly. I personally like to write my responses in a Word document, and then I do a lot of my editing and checking there, and then I cut and paste and drag and drop and put the text into the online form. But you can actually type on the run and spell check while you're in the template itself, and it will check for you. There's an active word count that is displayed below each of the narrative fields, so there is a finite number of words associated with each response. And then most, if not all, of the fields have an icon that looks like a blue bubble for additional help. And if you click on that, it will reveal either some websites or some additional information, tips and helpers, if you will, to how to respond to the different questions. And you can always save and finish later, and it will store your in-progress application. You don't have to sit and do this in one sitting. You can actually work on it, close it, save it, and return, and it will store and save your work. You can come back at a later time, pick up where you left off. So if you close and you finish and you come back the next day, you'll actually be returning to that onboarding section, and you'll click on the button called Resume Application. And this will bring you back to your account profile, and you can resume where you left off. So some brief changes again for 2022. The score is not based on a 100-point scale. It's a new rating system. It's a 4-point rating step, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Now the applications, there is no specific question or response that is directly related to any specific program criteria, unlike the past. So you may be accustomed to providing responses to criteria 1, and that might have had 5 points, or a different criteria might have had 8 points. So there is no nexus between a point value and a specific question. Each of the questions does not have a point value or weight. So the reviewers or the evaluators are going to be evaluating on the overall quality of the proposal in relation to the program criteria that we talked about earlier. The format of the online template is a little different. The attachments that you're going to be providing are embedded within different pages or sections of the application. So unlike the past, they're not gathered at the final page of the application template. So as you work your way through the different sections, you see a prompt that will say attachment, for budget, or attachment for artistic services, etc. Now the application will be the basis of your 22 grant agreement. Our goal this next year is not to have any revision of contracts. So when you sign the contract template, which next year will be much, much more simple, your application will serve as the representation to the division as to what funded services and deliverables you're going to provide in relation to that funding. So you need to be accurate and conservative, if you will, and your responses clear and concise in the application itself. And the panel, when they review, you're welcome to come to these meetings, but there's no interaction with the panelists. And then moving into the second year, after we complete fiscal year 22, you'll be sent an interim online application where you'll be updating us with the new programmatic information for fiscal year 23. And then this will then become the basis of your FY 2023 grant agreement. So again, we talked about the navigation of the form. Drafts are easy. It's a utility within the application. And you can always save a draft. And when you do, you'll actually receive an email in your email inbox, which is a backup copy of what you've written, just as a precaution. So the application starts off with some basic information, name, mission, your name, listing the CEO or executive director, and then you'll list another primary contact, and that most likely will be maybe a development director or maybe project administrator, address, city, state, and zip. And then there'll be a question, a drop down, if you will, that will say, please list the Broward County Commission district served as it relates to your corporate address. So you'll activate the appropriate number of districts through a drop-down. And if you don't know what that is, there will be a GIS hyperlink embedded in the application itself that you can click on, and you can type in your address, and then it will tell you which commission or district you actually are located in. And this is for your corporate address. Web, EIN number, tax registration date, DUNS number, fiscal year. And then there's, as similar to previous years, there'll be a program area drop-down where you can select up to 5 different disciplines. At the bottom of that first page, there'll be a kind of a thumbnail summary of both your expenses and revenues for the completed current and next fiscal year. And the Excel sheet will have more detail, and I'll show that in a minute. So this is the criteria, artistic merit and quality of program. The array of questions will go, please provide a history of your organization, including success and accomplishments, awards, a program narrative section. So here you'll be describing in detail your organization's overall core programs, including the number of programs, concerts, or exhibits, a description of each, key project dates, venues, major featured artists, and you'll list all the performances for the next fiscal year. So that's for October of 21 through September 30th, 22. On that same page, you'll be asked, as you've done in the past, to list the venues and their addresses as to where the funded activities will occur. Now, what's new for this year is that there will be a drop-down box feature indicated, or you'll be indicating to us the status of the venue. Is it confirmed or not confirmed? And then next to that venue, there'll be a projected attendance figure for each venue or each funded venue that you're providing services. And now here, you'll also be asked to provide the county commission district as to where the venue is located. So previously you were doing it for your corporate address. Here you're going to be notating the commissioner district being served as to the venue location. And once again, you can fire off the hyperlink, and that'll take you to a utility where you can type in the venue address, and it will reveal the commission district. Now, if the venue is not available, or if you've not been able to secure it, if your response was, is the venue confirmed no, then please do advise us on the status of how that booking is going. Is it under contract? Is it a scheduling issue? Is it a technical limitation? Just give the reader some insight as to where you are and the status of how you're securing your venues for next year. And then there is a total projected attendance figure. Remember, there might be 3 or 4 different venues that you're working in. There's a keypad icon that you'll click, and it will auto-calculate the total attendance, projected attendance. And then the second portion of the artistic quality, merit and quality of program, you're going to be describing the process used to choose artists. This is kind of like a curatorial philosophy in terms of how do you assemble your programs, who decides. And then you'll be listing the biographies of the outside artistic contractual employees of the organization whose services are specifically identified with the program and project support. This might be artistic directors, conductors, composers, choreographers, musicians, teachers, instructors, whatnot. But and by each biography, there'll be a drop-down feature where you'll indicate the engagement status of these creative individuals. Are these artists and performers confirmed or not confirmed? Please let us know. And then it is in this section, you're not listing the regular administrative staff or artistic staff from your organization. That will be done under the organizational capacity section later on. It's here you're going to be describing the artistic outside contractuals that you're going to be bringing in or hiring in relation to the program. And then in this section, there'll be an attachment requirement. It's here you'll be indicating or showing the either images or samples of work of the proposed and confirmed artists for the programming next year. Okay, criteria 2 is community benefit. We'll ask you to describe the number of either Broward resident artists, non-Broward resident artists, artists living out of the Tri-County area that might be in other parts of Florida or other parts of the United States or even international. And there'll be a total number of artists that you're going to be hiring. Next, you'll describe the need for your organizations and how you address within Broward County and within the specific community where your organization is located. If your programming takes place at locations other than where your office is located, what guides you in making those decisions? In other words, why do you select the venues? How does your organization add to and enrich the cultural landscape and history and traditions of the county? What makes your organization unique and best positioned to do this work? And then tell us about your core audience. Where do they come from? Are they local, regional, perhaps out of state? And describe what methods you use to track or verify this information. And then next, how is your organization working to expand beyond its core audience and to attract new audiences? And then the second portion of the community benefit, does your organization work to reach underserved and underrepresented audiences? If so, please describe these efforts to us in detail. How do you make programming accessible to the broadest range of individuals? Now, this is a new question for this year, is that the County Commission has a series of goals, visions, and values. And there are two that are closely related to the arts and cultural area. So of these two different categories, whether providing diverse cultural cultural, educational, and historical amenities and programs that contribute to a vibrant, multicultural, and economically viable community, or your work is improving access to business development, educational, cultural, and recreational opportunities and amenities to the economically disadvantaged. So there'll be a response to these two in terms of describe how your organization addresses these County Commission goals, vision, and values. And then the other part of organizational capacity is not unlike last year's applications or previous ones. You'll be listing up to 3 key organizational goals and objectives for the coming funding period. Remember, these goals should be realized in timelines, budgets, and be realistic and quantifiable. And how will you know that these goals are being achieved? In other words, what metrics will you be using to evaluate, or what methods? And it's here you're going to be listing the biographies of the key organizational personnel. So this is the administrative and artistic staff of the organization. That could be the artistic director or curator. Those are responsible for the selection of these artists and making programmatic decisions, fundraising, and strategic decision-making. There'll be a separate section for the organizational budget and narrative. Here you'll be explaining in detail the revenue and expense aspects of your proposed program, provide detail about the line items in your program budget, make clear to us how you intend to spend the GOS dollars. So let's take a moment and look at what that form might look like. So give me a minute here. So along with the onboarding script that we'll be sending out by email, we'll be also attaching, this is an editable Excel file that also calculates. It's not too unlike what you've done in the past where you were to provide a 3-year presentation of your income and revenue. But on the expense side, what you're going to be doing is listing in 4 columns the actuals of the most recently completed fiscal year, the current board-approved budget, and then a projection of next fiscal year in terms of expenses. What's different or new is that you're going to be providing us how you intend to allocate the county funds when you are awarded in fiscal year 22. In other words, how will you allocate those funds in these different expense categories? This fifth column, you'll leave blank. So remember when we talked about the project report later down the road, we'll be returning to this form after the fiscal year is over and after your season has been completed. And it will be here, you'll be reporting to us kind of a comparison as to, so how did you really use the funds in terms of, those allocations, and how closely were they to the projected or proposed allocation of county funds. So administrative, programmatic, and other expenses. And then the parallel tab is income. And these two are joined so that as you begin to populate one, it'll inform the other form as well. So this is the income side. So actuals for the most recently completed fiscal year, your current board approved budget, income, and then next fiscal year projected income. And this is where you'll indicate earned income. This is ticket sales, contractual services, rental fees, a section for grants, be they federal, state, or local, and contributed income. This is from your board, corporations, foundations, individuals, fundraisers, other. So this information will link, the total columns will speak to one another, so it'll show you surpluses and deficits as you're completing the form. And then once you've completed it, this will be uploaded as part of your presentation. Okay, so that's the form. So here's a description of those columns I just showed you. Again, column 5, you don't need to worry about that. You can leave that one blank, but you will return to that when the programs are all over. So also in organizational capacity, you'll be describing revenue projections, including the process for deriving projected earned revenue numbers, as well as numbers associated with contributed revenue. And explain any variances that maybe 10% or more between last year's and the current organizational budget. You'll be communicating your fundraising strategy to us. And is there a planned deficit, or if so, please describe how this will be addressed. And does the board have an approved fundraising plan? And then there'll be another question regarding your marketing strategy. How do you market what you're programming? So describe here in detail the marketing strategy, including any campaigns or marketing outlets that you're going to be using. There'll be a page for you to indicate total number of board members, total number of staff, and total number of volunteers, as well as employees, be they full-time, part-time, or contract employees. And under the board category, we're going to be asking you to indicate a percentage of the board members who actually contribute. It's just the amount doesn't really matter, but maybe 12% of the board contributes, maybe 7%. You just provide the numeral for us to give us an idea as to what percentage of the board does contribute financially to your organization. And then the attachments that are associated with this section, a PDF copy of your organization's current and board-approved budget, financial statements from the past 2 years, including a statement of activities, profit and loss, and a statement of financial position, a balance sheet, assets and liabilities. Here you'll upload the strategic plan, and then, if applicable, the most recently completed audit. And then the fifth attachment, this is the IRS 990 form, so we'll be asking for 3 consecutive years of 990s, so we can analyze the operating expenses. And then the last few pages, there's a question regarding ADA compliance. Remember that anything that we fund has to be presented or provided in a ADA compliant environment or venue. And then there'll be a section asking you to certify or affirm that things that we were finding that the applicant shall not unlawfully discriminate against any person based on race, color, religion, sex, national origin, age, political affiliation, disability, sexual orientation, gender identity and expression, pregnancy, veteran status, or any other unlawfully discriminatory basis during the performance of any programming event or operation for which county funds are awarded pursuant to this application. So do make your programming available to everyone. And then you'll be certifying the application. So as you complete the application, remember you need not have to do it in one sitting. You can actually work on it, save your work, come back and resume working on the application at a later time. And then you always click on that resume application button here. And when you've completed your application, there is a review my application button that you hit. This will take you to like a proofreading stage where you can analyze the entire application from top to bottom. Now, if there are any errors in the application, there'll be some red notes or stars that'll be listed to the field. So maybe you inadvertently forgot an attachment or neglected to respond to one of the questions. It's okay. You just have to fix those errors, save the application again. And if there are no errors, then a submit button will appear at the bottom, and that will be your cue to say that it's ready to go. So please do remember to submit on time. So that's a review of the outline of the application. Some questions are similar to what we've asked for in the past. Some questions are new questions that we're asking for from applicants. So if there are any questions, we're happy to respond, or maybe Erica can take everybody off mute, or maybe they can, if there's any comments or questions in the chat box, please let us know.
You're welcome to unmute yourself if you would like to ask a question, or you can type it in the chat box. Okay, hearing none. Thank you all for attending the General Operating Support Application Workshop. Once again, if you are a new grantee, you will need to submit your determination of eligibility by this Friday. So that's in 2 days to be considered for FY 2022 through 2023 funding. Please email or call Jim and I. Our contact information is located on the General Operating Support Grants Manual, which you can find on the website that's now in the chat box. And thanks for attending, and we'll look forward to hearing from you all. Happy New Year.